What is going on, everybody? This is Andrew from DeFiancy. So today, I want to go over a few things that we talked about in the last video, but I really want to get into some crypto here because I think this is probably a good time to really start talking about it. We've had some really impressive price action over the last few days, but really today I think was really potentially a game changer in terms of the reaction we got out of Bitcoin. So let's just start there. We're looking at the Bitcoin chart here, looking at the monthly. Looks pretty good, but we're going to zoom in here a little bit and talk about what happened today. So if you've been watching any of my videos, you would have noticed that this 200-day moving average is really important. I've been talking a lot about this 200-day moving average. The reason why is because a lot of people kind of segment this this average into like bull market, bear market, like threshold. At least I do. And the reason I do that is if you look at it, even going back years, typically when you stay under the 200-day moving average, you stay under there for a while. It's not always the case, but when you get above it, you typically stay above it for a while. So it's been a really reliable moving average, in my opinion, on really showing if bulls or bears are in control from a higher time frame perspective. And right now, we are testing it. We're like right on it right now. We might even be a little bit over it. And I think this is really interesting because we had two rejections here, and a lot of people got super bearish, including me, to be honest, because when I initially looked at this, I'm looking at a distributed top, basically big whales distributing price, and I'm like, okay, this thing's fixing, about to do what it did at the end of 2021 and also the beginning of 2022, which was a really big breakdown after it finished this what's called a head and shoulders, right? So this is one way to look at it. But now we're starting to see there's actually an alternative way to look at this, and now you have this bold accumulation structure under here, undeniable at this point. And I'm not saying it's going to hold, but bulls are really they've showed up since we had this retest of 25K. And I really think that people should probably start looking at Bitcoin a little closer. The volumes have been really low, but I think the volumes can pick up if people start to feel the FOMO bug. And in crypto, that can happen pretty quickly if you've been around the space. So, in my opinion, if we can break above, I'm still thinking we're going to get, some tests, maybe a test in this white space here, potentially, somewhere in here. Oops. Maybe somewhere in here, 27.6, something like that. Don't be surprised if that happens. But if we can close above this 200-day moving average, that is going to really, I think, change, people's mindset about where this could go going into, the end of the year. So we're not there yet. I'd like to see this break above and hold it for a few days before we really get really bullish. But definitely a good start. Look, I mean, if you look at this thing on the 4-hour, I love candles like this. If you're looking right here, you see this candle. That is a candle that's telling you, nope, I'm not going down. So you had a big sell-off this morning because of the NFP. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But after that data came out, algorithms started dumping on the indexes, the legacy indexes, and there is somewhat of a correlation with Bitcoin. It's been more or less correlated lately, but it had this big sell-off and then just immediate reaction, basically saying, look, bulls are in control here, at least at the moment. Now look, I never tell people to FOMO at the top of a range, which right now, if you look at this as a range, many people will say, look, I'm not, you got to be careful because this 28K level roughly, is a kind of a range high, or at least has been. But if we can get above this, I think we're gonna be looking at this in a different way. But I really like the response, and I think some of the altcoins are going to be really interesting if Bitcoin can continue to show strength. One thing I want to show you guys, I'm a really big fan of Solana from a technical standpoint or like a technology standpoint, but I'm also a really big fan of it, maybe more, of this chart. I think this has just an amazing chart. So there may not be a chart like this in crypto, to be honest, at least in terms of a larger market cap that has just been absolutely wrecked. So look at this thing from the all-time high. I'm not even going to take the wick. I'm just going to take these monthly closes to be fair here, to about where we are now, down around 90%. Okay. And look at this beautiful accumulation structure we have. Mind you, this is a monthly chart here. So this has had some time to really accumulate. And man, I really like this chart in terms of how this looks. Usually when you have a really nice base like this, when this thing starts to run, look, it's not going to be hard to see this thing go to $40. I'm not saying it goes there. I'm just saying when this thing starts to get some momentum, don't be surprised to really see this thing get loose. And if you look at it on the weekly, it also looks fantastic. I mean, just again, really nice accumulation structure. Don't be surprised, if it comes back and tests somewhere around, 21. I would actually think that as long as it can hold, around 20 and a half, this thing is still looking really nice. So, I really believe that this is pretty much like Ethereum of 2020. Honestly, if you go back and look at Ethereum, this was the bear market of, the last bear market we had that topped in 2018 and bottomed, and really bottomed in 2018, but it had a retest during the COVID crash. But look what it did from that bottom. Over 5,000%. So there are some very good similarities here between Solana and ETH. So it went down like 5% roughly. Had this big, nice accumulation down here. And once it got rolling, and again, this was, after the Bitcoin halving, and you had money printing, Ober, all this stuff. So you had some really good things happen there that allowed this to happen. But we're looking at Solana now, and look, it's hard to say that there's not some similarities here. So if we go and pull back up this Solana chart here, okay, I'm gonna try to get this can you see what I'm talking about here? So here's Solana, and pretend this is, basically the top of ETH, okay? So big pullback, like 95% like ETH, big accumulation down here. I mean, look how similar it looks. And if it went 5,000%, look, I'm not saying it's going to go 5,000%. Let's just, put that theory out there, right? Solana's over $1,000 at that point. So I do believe that Solana is going to be a widely used blockchain for many purposes, but especially for things that are fast, that need like high speed, kind of like if the Helium network, it needs really fast consensus time, and things like that's infrastructure. They're actually calling that DePIN, decentralized infrastructure. Things like that, trading, all sorts of different things that I probably haven't even thought of. I think we're going to be built on Solana because there's certain things that really aren't possible on the Ethereum virtual machine at this moment, or even on the layer 2s. And I'm a big fan of Ethereum and its layer 2 community. But Solana is, in my opinion, just from a trading perspective, it's more interesting to me. All right. Let's go look at the indexes. Let's get back to a single chart here and talk a little bit about what happened today. We're going to look at the Nasdaq. So last time we talked about, let me get this set here. So last time we were talking about how it had this nice this nice bottom that it had put in. It didn't want to break below it. And today, let's kind of zoom in. You had the news come out, and the NFP, which is non-farm payroll, which shows you really, I'm going to go into my own opinion on that, but just like a broad overview of it is, the non-farm payroll is basically a signal that analysts can use to see, really it kind of gives you a glimpse in maybe what the employment data will look like, or really showing you where it is now. But people are using that as a kind of a proxy for how the Fed is going to be looking at, the employment dynamic in respect to whether they should raise interest rates or pause or cut or whatever. So it came in hot, meaning there was more people were added to the United States employment bucket, whatever you want to call it. And it freaked the markets out initially because people kind of reflexively assumed that, okay, good news is not good, good news is bad news because that means the Fed could be more aggressive. The interesting thing is we had already sold off here because of the JOLTS data on Tuesday, which is another employment metric that was saying that it was also, that employment was still hot in the country. And then you had a kind of a conflicting report with the ADP number that came out on Thursday that said actually things were cooling. My stance on NFP is that it might not be that accurate of a number because ADP I think is more official in terms of data. I think that's actually like more accurate data. I'm not an expert on this, but I think non-farm payroll is like what people are reporting, and they may not be, the data may not be as accurate. Again, that's just my opinion, but regardless, I think this bounce was going to happen either way. As soon as we got down there was a lot. You could see the accumulation in the order flow, and once it started running, I mean, it never stopped today. So you had this relatively monster rally, all things considered, today, and it was a really nice trade if you caught it somewhere, before the breakout. Going forward here, I got a few different levels I'm looking at for the Nasdaq, and I think basically where it is right now is probably going to be, a decent level that people will take profit. I'm not necessarily expecting this just to break out from here. I'm going to be scalping it and looking for, a pullback, but eventually I do believe we're going to test the top of this trend line, which would be roughly like, 15.5 K, right? And that'll probably be a place you'll see, people taking profit. But this thing looks really good, in my opinion, going into the end of the year. We had talked about how we have earnings season starting next week. A lot of these tech stocks, which the Nasdaq is, denominated by big tech stocks, and if their earnings are good, expect for this to probably break higher. But don't be surprised, in my opinion, to see some chop here. I look at it like this: a lot of guys, they're going to buy. They bought as soon as this thing broke, but some people, they might wait for a retest down here somewhere near, 1,500. And if it gets there, I think it's going to get bought. So looking really good, in my opinion, going forward over the next few months. Again, might be some chop because the whole bond, quote unquote crisis might not be over. We were talking about TLT last video. It still had a negative day, but there was some decoupling, which it seemed like we were coupled to, the yields rising and a little bit of decoupling today. Obviously, you had a short squeeze. We need to really see if that's going to be signal going forward. But good news is the dollar. It to me looks like it might be top for a while, and that's great news. We really hope. We don't want to see this thing keep pumping ahead because that typically is a risk off. It gives investors and traders a kind of a risk off signal. All right, guys. Well, that's really all I want to bring. I want to keep this one short and sweet. That's all I got for today. And until next time, happy hunting, friends.